Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. I thought hiring a tutor for my daughter Ellie would be a simple fix better grades. Fewer nights spent tossing and turning, stressing about assignments. I figured he'd help her with algebra and history, maybe even spark a little enthusiasm for learning again. But when Daniel walked through my door on a rainy Thursday afternoon, with his charming smile, warm demeanor, and that comforting politeness, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. This was going to work, I thought. Everything would fall into place, but what I didn't expect, what I couldn't have prepared myself for, was how week after week, as he patiently taught Ellie fractions and essays, Daniel began to teach me. Something I didn't even know I needed to learn. Something that had been buried inside me for a long time, waiting to be uncovered. One afternoon, as I cleared away the teacups and the sound of laughter still lingered in the air, Daniel looked at me with an earnestness that struck me deep. His words that day weren't just about academics or tutoring. They weren't about Ellie at all. He said something that shook me to my core, something so simple yet so profound, that for the first time in ages, I saw myself differently. Suddenly, the lessons weren't just for Ellie anymore. I remember the first time I met Daniel. It was a gray Thursday afternoon, the kind of day that invites reflection and introspection. Ellie had been struggling for months, her grades slipping, her enthusiasm for school fading, and I was desperate for help. That's when Daniel appeared at my door, holding a weathered leather satchel and wearing a navy jacket that seemed too casual for the moment, but somehow fit perfectly with his presence. He wasn't much older than Ellie, but there was something about him, an easy confidence, a warmth that immediately put me at ease. "Mrs. Lawson, I'm Daniel. Thanks for having me," he said with a firm handshake and a smile that seemed to light up the room. His presence was refreshing, almost comforting in a way I hadn't realized I needed. In the weeks that followed, Daniel became a fixture in our home. Twice a week after school, he'd come over, and while Ellie would patiently work through fractions and history essays, I'd hover nearby pretending to read, pretending to tidy up, but secretly listening. His voice, steady and calming, had a rhythm to it that was both encouraging and patient. And I realized, somewhere in the back of my mind, that his voice was doing something more than just helping Ellie with her homework. It was gently unraveling a knot in my own heart. For the first time in years, the house felt different. It wasn't the quiet monotony of solitary days, just the hum of work and the weight of responsibilities. After my divorce, I had become used to the silence, used to the separation between my past and whatever future I had ahead of me. Ellie had her teenage world, and I had mine, and the invisible wall between us was something we both knew how to navigate. But Daniel, with his laughter and easy way of being present, broke through that wall in ways I didn't even know were possible. One evening, after a particularly stormy day, Daniel stayed a little later than usual. The roads were flooded, and Ellie had already gone to bed. I made us some tea, and we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the steam rising between us like a soft, unspoken connection. "You handle her well," he said, his eyes meeting mine with a look that was full of understanding, not judgment. I smiled, trying to hold back my words. "She's stubborn like her mother," I said, trying to make light of it, but he laughed softly, genuinely. "Not that that's a bad thing," he said with a twinkle in his eye. "It just means she's got a strong personality." The conversation drifted from Ellie to lighter topics, books, travel, and even some embarrassing childhood stories. I found myself laughing in a way I hadn't in years. The kind of laugh that felt like it loosened something deep inside of me. As the night wore on, I noticed things about him that I hadn't allowed myself to see before. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how thoughtfully he listened, the way he nervously tapped his fingers on his cup as he spoke. Something in me shifted. For the next week, Daniel's visits became more regular. Sometimes he'd arrive a little earlier, sometimes a little later. Ellie liked him and I trusted him, but there was something else, something unspoken, building between us. It was a feeling that lingered in the space between us during those moments when Ellie wasn't around. One evening, as Daniel was packing up his things, he hesitated for a moment before turning to me. "Mrs. Lawson," he began, his voice unsteady. "Can I ask you something?" My heart skipped. "Of course." He took a deep breath, his eyes searching for the right words. "Have you ever felt like you were living the life you were meant to be?" I froze, caught off guard. The question was so unexpected, so personal, that I didn't know how to respond. It wasn't about fractions or history. It wasn't about Ellie. It was about me. I swallowed hard, sensing that this question was opening something inside of me. "Sometimes," I whispered, though I knew I hadn't been living the life I truly wanted. I hadn't been living a life at all, I'd been existing. Daniel nodded as though he understood exactly what I meant. There was no pity in his eyes, no judgment, just understanding. And that both terrified and excited me. That night, after Daniel left, I sat alone in the living room, his question echoing in my mind. It was the first time in years that I had even considered the idea that I could have a life different from the one I was just surviving. But Daniel's simple, unexpected question had unlocked something deep inside of me, and I knew then that nothing would ever be the same in the following weeks. Our time together was a strange mix of normalcy and unspoken tension. Daniel and Ellie would sit at the table, discussing history and math, laughing at their jokes and inside references, but I felt an undercurrent of something shifting between us. Every time our eyes met across the room, there was hesitation, like something was waiting to be acknowledged, but wasn't being said. One Friday night, Ellie asked if she could stay at a friend's house after their lesson. I agreed without thinking, and when Daniel arrived, he was unaware that tonight would be different, quieter, more vulnerable. As he was packing up, he glanced toward the door. "Ellie's not home tonight?" he asked, his voice casual but soft. Nodded. "She went to a friend's house." There was a moment of hesitation. "You sure you don't mind if I stay a little longer?" he asked. The question hung in the air, like an invitation wrapped in something else. I nodded again, but there was an unfamiliar feeling between us, charged, like electricity in the air. We made tea, our familiar routine, but everything felt different. Now, the conversation started with casual topics, the weather, the weekend, but inevitably, it returned to that question. "I've been thinking about what you asked me," I said, my fingers gripping the warm mug. "About the life I'm supposed to be living." Daniel leaned slightly forward, his eyes warm, searching mine. "And what do you think?" I found myself confessing, quietly, almost reluctantly. "I think I've forgotten what it means to truly live." His gaze softened. Slowly, carefully, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. The touch was light, questioning, but it sent shivers through me. "We deserve better," he said, his voice steady. "More than just surviving. More than being alone." The world seemed to shrink between us, and for a moment, the space between us held all the possibility in the world. Daniel stood, walked around the table, and knelt in front of me. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "You are beautiful," he said, his voice trembling slightly as if holding back more words. "You are strong, and you deserve to feel alive again." I felt something stirred deep inside me, something I hadn't felt in years, seen, recognized, and valued for who I was, not just as a mother or an ex-wife. His gaze softened, but he placed his finger gently on my lips, silencing me. "I know this is complicated," he whispered. "I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know I'm here." I closed my eyes for a moment, summoning the courage I hadn't known I still had. I wasn't ready, but I could feel something inside me stirring. Something that could change everything. When I opened them again, he watched still their patience, still waiting. I reached out, running my fingers through his hair, feeling the soft strands against my skin. He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch with a soft sigh, as if he'd been holding his breath forever. When our lips finally met, it wasn't rushed or frantic. It was slow, hesitant, an exploration, not a conquest. His hands cubed my face as if I were something precious and fragile. And in that moment, I knew I wanted to be broken. I wanted to feel he helped me up, wrapping his arms around me, waist holding me tight. We moved as if to an invisible hymn, our bodies syncing naturally. It wasn't about urgency, but about discovering that I was still capable of passion, desire, and connection. He drew kisses along my jaw, along my neck, each touch reverently, each breath of silent adoration. His hands stressed the curves of my body, not with hunger, but with wonder, as if he were committing me to memory, and I let go. I let myself be penetrated with each caress, each word he whispered against my skin. I let myself be enveloped in warmth, and the rightness of it all. Years of loneliness and doubt melted away beneath the stick. When he finally lifted me into his arms and carried me to the couch, there was tenderness in his strength, a promise that he wouldn't hurt me, that he would cherish the part of me I was willing to give him. We made love slowly, without rushing, learning each other's rhythms, each other's vulnerability. It wasn't about affection. It was about honesty. The healing that comes from touch, done carefully and intentionally, afterward, welling entwined together under a soft blanket. The dim light casting soft shadows on the room, I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling a deep sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Ran his fingers through my hair, his touch light as a feather. You're amazing, he whispered. I smiled against his skin, feeling tears welling in the corners of my eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. Gratitude that life, Funhum Prodigal, gave me this unexpected gift. Thank you, it whispered. He tightened his arms around me. No, he said quietly, thank you for believing in me. We stayed like that for a long time, words weren't needed. The silence between us was no longer burdened by loneliness. It was filled with comfort and hope. Finally, he kissed the top of my head and said, "It doesn't have to in here." I lifted my head to look at him. I wasn't. He smiled, a little shy, a little hopeful. "No, if you don't mind, I'd like to see where this might lead." My heart, once so reserved, was beating with cautious hope I'd spent so long keeping to myself, convinced that this chapter of my life was over. But Daniel showed me that there was still so much to write, that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for me to find happiness. Again, I cubed his face in my hands, feeling thoroughness of his stubble, the warmth of his skin. I wish I could, I said, and for the first time in a long time I was serious. The next morning, the sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow on the living room. I woke up still, wrapped in Daniel's arms, his breathing even a comforting rhythm against my back for a few blissful minutes. I lay there enveloped in gentle warmth, pretending the outside world didn't exist, but reality soon hit me, the sound of a text notification. The faint tick of the wall clock, a stark reminder that this perfect, fragile moment couldn't last forever. I carefully unbuckled myself and sat up, pulling feet covers tighter around me. Daniel moved and reached for me instinctively. His fingers grazed my arm. His touch sent a familiar tingle up my spine. "You're not running away, are you?" he whispered. Still half asleep, I managed a small, rueful smile. "No, I was just thinking." He sat up, resting his chin on his hand as he watched me about what I was hesitant about how to explain. The storm inside me, the fear of being judged, the fear of complicating sovereignty, the fear of losing myself again in someone else's story instead of writing my own. "I'm scared," I admitted finally. Daniel's face softened. "No, not for me," I said quickly. I reached out to touch his knee, about what this meant, about what would happen next. He nodded, understanding more in that moment than I could put into words. "We don't have to figure everything out today," he said quietly, step by step, step by step. It seems so simple, but after years of carrying the burden of responsibility, of repressing my needs for others, it felt like I was entering a completely unknown world. Later that day, after Daniel had left, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at my reflection in the window. I was the same tired eyes, the same soft chisella blades over time, though inside everything had dawned. A knock on the door jolted me out of my thoughts. I opened it to find Ellie home, early, flushed with excitement from a sleepover mom. She said, hugging me, "Guess what, we're having a big senior party. Can we have it here?" "We'll see, babe," I say, bawling and stroking her hair as she talked about her plans. I realized something. This was what I'd been striving for, not just for a fling or a romantic fantasy, but for a more fulfilling life. A life where I'm more than just a caregiver, more than just a support figure. A few days later, Daniel returned for another session. This time things were different. We were different. Our interactions took in a new dimension of tenderness deeper than words. As Ellie finished her homework, Daniel and I exchanged furtive glances across the room. Small, secret smiles. It was both exciting and terrifying, as if we were balancing on the edge of something vast and unknown. After Ellie went upstairs, Tasha or Daniel stayed in the kitchen while I cleaned up. A heavy silence fell between us. Not uncomfortable, but heavy with all the rest of the talk. Finally, I spoke. I meant it. I wasn't going anywhere if you didn't tell me. I looked at him, really looked at him, the seriousness in his eyes, the firmness in his voice. This wasn't a boy playing. This was a man who saw me, who wanted me as I was and not as I had been. I don't want you to go, I said a little louder, a whisper of relief. Filled his face, and he closed the distance between us, pulling me into a hug. That said everything we were afraid to say. Buried my face in his chest, breathing him and feeling his steady heartbeat against mine. It was messy, complicated, terrifying betrayal. In the days that followed, we found a rhythm, small stolen moments, the touch of fingers, a shared smile, a fleeting glance. It wasn't about rushing towards some grand statement. It was about building something fragile and real moment by moment, and maybe that was the lesson he truly come to teach me, that life didn't have to be perfect to be beautiful, that I had the right to want more to achieve a happiness. Even if it scared me, especially if it scared me, because so many is what scares us most are Theons, who set us free. The weeks turned into months, and the quiet rhythm we built became the new background music of my life. This wasn't a whirlwind romance nor storybook drama. This was something so much better. It was real, it was slow, and it was ours. Daniel continued to teach Eli, and somewhere between the algebra lessons and the late night coffee had become part of our family. I found myself laughing more, worrying less, and trusting the world and myself a little more each day. One evening, as we sat together on the perch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Daniel reached out. His thumb traced small circles on my skin, drawing me closer to the ground, reassuring. "You changed my life, you know," said quietly. I smiled, feeling tears sprinkling the corners of my eyes. "You changed my eyes too." There were still moments when doubt creeps and whispering gold fears. But then I looked up at him and remembered the lesson he taught me without meaning to. It's never too late to open your heart. It's never too late to choose joy. As the stars twinkled into life above my head, Daniel kissed my temple and whispered, "This is just the beginning." And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. Maybe love doesn't always flow into your life so forcefully. Sometimes it comes quietly just when you need it most.